Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal for this week's Inside Arsenal Extra Time. As you can see, I'm joined by James Benge, as always, of CBS Sports. James, how you doing, mate? You all good?
I'm great. Sun is shining. I've kept you from the golf course.
Ugh.
Summer is upon us. It's beautiful, isn't it? I'm going to keep adjusting my laptop slightly because I've got it wrong initially and I look a lot shorter than you. And I don't want our viewers to think I'm shorter than you.
You are shorter than me, surely.
6'2".
Oh, no, you're definitely taller than me. You're not
Indeed.
6'2". I'm not having that. That's as bad as your Crystal Palace top four shout.
Tape measure next time I see you, which is next season, or the Champions League final. And I'm 6'2".
6'2". Oh, I think you're being generous there, mate.
I am absolutely tall enough to be a set piece threat for Mikel Arteta. I'm left 8, mate. Think about it. Doesn't need to touch the ball very much. Just smack yourself around a bit.
James Benge, the box crashing midfielder that Arsenal need to take them to the Champions League final. There you go. There you go. So how are you doing? How's the week been? This is actually before we go on. This is your last show for a few weeks now. Off on your world travels on your honeymoon, aren't you?
Yeah, really excited. Initially, I thought I'd timed the honeymoon perfectly, and I'm due to land on the Sunday morning of the final day of the Premier League season, and I'd almost planned to book my train tickets to Southampton too, just so I was ready to go. And in retrospect, I think it was quite a good decision to just hold off on sorting any transport to Southampton. So I'll be back for the final day of the season, and I reserve the right to message you from undisclosed honeymoon location and say I'd like to do a bonus Inside Arsenal Extra Time if Arsenal do go through in the semi-final. I reserve that right, but our viewers should really plan around not seeing me for the remainder of this season.
I tell you what, you must have, if you on your honeymoon take a half an hour break to go and record an Inside Arsenal Extra Time, you've got a much more accepting wife than I have. Believe me. But I'm open to it.
I haven't said I won't lie to her about what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'll work out what the lie is if and when Arsenal win.
There's a long way to go. I mean, how did you? I mean, we're a couple of days out now from the first leg. How are you feeling about it now?
Yeah, I mean, it all started so well, but actually, well, we thought it had, but it turned out that Tom Canton and Mike from the Gooners pod had cursed us all along.
I know.
They thought they were taking us to a restaurant with special powers because they'd been there for the Real Madrid game and Arsenal had won. But it turns out it would appear that actually what they need to do is be going and eating appropriate food for the opposition that they're due to play. So we went to a Spanish restaurant, fantastic, on Strat Green Road, Luna Lena, because that's where they've been to beat Madrid. Perhaps we should have gone to a French restaurant. And it's going to be really challenging to now work out, if what the exact parameters are here that we need to apply for next season.
Yes, I'm definitely blaming Tom and Mike for their for everyone who's listening, wondering what the hell we're going on about. We did go out for real before the game on Wednesday, and we went to a Spanish restaurant that Tom and Mike had been to before Real Madrid, and superstitious that we football fans are, they wanted to repeat the trick ahead of PSG. It didn't work. It did have a lovely paella though, I have to say.
It was good.
It was very nice. But yeah, it didn't quite work out. Disappointing night. I mean, we've spoke about it a lot. Obviously, it's a couple of days on from that now, but I mean, I was talking to you before we sort of started recording this, and you said that you're feeling maybe a little bit more confident now about the second leg that you were in the immediate aftermath of the result on Tuesday night. Why is that?
I mean, watching the game back, you see that there is that 15 to 20 minute period, the one that Arteta references in his press conference, where Arsenal can't do a thing right. It's horrible. The duels, they're winning like a quarter of their duels. Everything is going wrong. And then when you take that period out, there is at least like the bulk of the game, Arsenal are at least a match for PSG. I think probably had the better of the chances, but it was close. So there is something there to work with. I can almost park those last 20 minutes because I think Arsenal just didn't have the players that they'll have this coming week. There is something there to give me hope. And I think I know what Arteta changed. There's a couple of options. and I think add Thomas Partey to the equation, that the second thing I think it might be is just going long a lot more. And I think if you put Partey in that team and you have Rice higher up and Marino at centre forward, you can really exploit those long balls, which I thought Arsenal did quite well as well. So I can sort of see how Arsenal get better at PSG. Good God, they're good.
Yeah, I think that's my big fear, sort of looking ahead to it, is that I agree. I think Arsenal can certainly get better. I think the return of Thomas Partey and what that's going to do, not just in terms of the midfield, but what it's going to do further forward as well. Like you said, Declan Rice played in that role where I think he can do them damage. I think we saw a couple of occasions when he did sort of get his head down and drive. You know, they struggled to deal with him. The Leandro Trossard chance, for example, we just didn't see that enough from Declan because of where he was playing. So that problem's kind of going to be solved by Partey's return, and then you're going to move Marino up front, which gives you, you know, more of a presence up there. Like you said, someone you can hit long. It also allows you to have another option to come off the bench if needed in that sort of last 20 minutes, or even if it goes to extra time. So I do think Arsenal, there is definitely something there for Arsenal. My concern is, I just think the first half hour is going to be so brutal. I think PSG, you know, if we think they came out of the blocks quickly at the Emirates, well, I think they're going to explode out the blocks on Wednesday night. From what I've seen them this season, the intensity they start with, I think that first half hour is going to be so difficult for Arsenal, and they're just going to have to hang in there, see it out, get a bit of luck, potentially try and get themselves into the game. If they can do that, if they get past half an hour still 0-0, then I think, you know, that you're well in the game at that point. My fear is that opening half hour and just how quickly PSG are going to start, and it's just about Arsenal sort of hanging on in there at that point and playing themselves into the game.
Remember what we said in January about how good Kvaratskhelia would have been for Arsenal?
Yeah, he was very good. I did think Timber stood up to him pretty well, though. The first sort of 20 minutes, obviously, he was threatening, really dangerous. But I thought, kind of like Arsenal, you know, Timber sort of played himself into the game, and he didn't get totally embarrassed by Kvaratskhelia at all. I thought he was matched up really well with him. And I saw some criticism, mainly from rival fans online about it. I don't really know what I saw there. I thought he played pretty well.
The numbers back that up. He won like none of his first 7 duels, and then 5 of the next, I want to say 6.
Okay, that kind of sums up Arsenal, I think. I don't think Arsenal were terrible on the night. Like, I've seen people say, we were awful. I don't think we were awful. You know, PSG are a very good team. I don't think Arsenal were awful. I think for the first half hour, they were like rabbits in headlights a little bit, and PSG were brilliant, really good. But then, you know, it settled down. And like you said, Arsenal had the chances to get themselves back in the game. The last 15 minutes, it drifted a little bit, I think, and Arsenal tired. They had very little on the bench to come on and change things. PSG did. And they had a couple of chances from that. Whether they would have been offside or not, if the ball would end up in the net, we never really know. But I thought, Arsenal settled in, and they were a decent enough matchup for PSG. And, you know, on another day, Martinelli scores, Trossard scores, and you're talking about a comeback win there. It was fine margins, as is always the way in the Champions League.
Yeah, it's very frustrating when you sort of see those stats at the end of the Champions League week and Arsenal have the most expected goals.
Yeah.
And I know there's a sort of a fair few weird like offside calls that weren't in that, but you just think, God, Arsenal just sometimes the ball just goes in. You know, sometimes that Ousmane Dembele shot might have hit the post, cannoned out, and everyone would have gone, lads, focus. And it would have been a disastrous 4 minutes that didn't result in anything. That's the breaks. The fear is always that 15 minutes in the Champions League semi-final, it doesn't have to, but it can be enough to kill it for you. And I do really fear that we'll say, if only Arsenal could go back and play those first 15 minutes again. And this is kind of why I wanted to talk about it. We'll come back to talk about what it was like pre-match. Was it too much? Did the emotion get too much for Arsenal, for the Emirates? And was it then too easy to pop? The balloon had blown up so much that when it popped, it was pretty explosive.
This is what you're talking about.
Less.
Thing of beauty. For those watching on YouTube, for those listening on podcast, I've just brought up a picture of can you even call that a Tifo? Does that count as a Tifo?
No.
Or is it
did you? This has never happened before at the Emirates. And it seems like a brilliant idea in principle, because I understand the people that were behind that could still see sort of through it clear as day. And what's so frustrating from an Arsenal perspective is you now walk around, because on Wednesday, I walked past the stadium and was thinking about this, and you see those, what I think are really excellent. What would you call them? The big images that on the wrap of the stadium now, the wrap. So
Yeah.
lifting the gold Premier League trophy, the flags from all around the world. Those are the two I see the most, but the other four as well. And you see kind of the amazing artwork that can be done when Arsenal really get their fan base involved in this. And we know that there are controversies and things around the Ashburton Army, particularly, but there are so many engaged fan groups and in creative people in the fan world who could have done something fun with this. What might as well still be a blank canvas that was up there. And I think I don't think it had any impact on the game or the momentum or the atmosphere. Intrigued to get your take from being in there. I think that was the best pre-match atmosphere I've ever experienced at the Emirates.
It was. I've never heard it like that. Honestly, down below was absolutely crazy. I never experienced anything like it at the Emirates. It was bouncing. Absolutely. People were in there. I think I got in. I don't know. I had a few beers at this point. I think I got in probably. Well, I was still in there when it was buy one get one free. So that was between 6 and 7 in terms of the beer offer they had. So I probably got in there about 6:30, which for me is so early.
Yeah.
And it was heaving. Like me and Mike went to the Tolly. We were walking to the Tolly, and that was at 5 o'clock. And thought we'd just walk in there and have like one. And it was 1 in 1 out. It was cute. It was like the most rammed Tolly you can possibly get. So the place was absolutely buzzing, and everyone piled inside. The atmosphere was incredible. Absolutely, it was bouncing. Like I said, it was as you pointed out, it was the loudest I've ever heard at the Emirates, without a shadow of a doubt.
It was brilliant, and North London Forever. I hate the song, but it gets you in the feels before those games. So I think you can park the Tifo, other than saying, like, guys, take two, please engage your fan base in this. Imagine if that was even just one of the North Banksy, get North Banksy to paint that for you as a starting point. And do that more often, by the way, because it's a great idea. And I don't think you have to save it. The only thing I wonder is, was there so much effort to rile up the crowd, to tell them that you can win this game for us, that it just, I think a lot of people were very critical, pundits as well as sort of bad faith fans online, were very critical about the atmosphere at the Emirates for most of that game. But, if you were there, why, and I'm sure you'll agree with this. Everything had been built up so much. It felt huge. It felt massive. You believed. And then you got punched in the jaw by PSG. And while I don't know if you can do anything different about that, I just think there has to be some understanding of what the Emirates was going through. There was so much effort to whip it up. I don't know if it was actually too much. And the crowd almost feel this weight of pressure on them. You have Mikel Arteta saying, you and the person next to you can win this game for us. I think you do sometimes sort of set yourselves up for we did all that and it just didn't stop PSG at all. What do you think? I don't know what you think about that impact.
I don't know. I first of all, I think the punditry and the comments about the atmosphere is frankly awful. I just don't understand how that was even a talking point after the game. And it's, to be honest, I didn't notice. I don't know. Maybe you did, sitting in the press box, but I didn't. When I was watching the game, I never at any point really felt like this is absolutely dead in here. Maybe that's because I was so into it or whatever. It just didn't. It didn't feel absolutely dreadful. I mean, obviously, the first 20 minutes, like you said, it was just like someone had taken a pin to it and just popped all that sort of pressure that had built up, because you'd put, everyone was on it, and then suddenly it was like, oh my God, we're losing. This is 2009 all over again. And I think it definitely took a while to sort of recover from, but I didn't think from that point onwards, from that sort of recovery, once we started getting into the game and creating chances, I didn't think it was awful by any means. I just feel like it's been really, really over the top. It's just like the narrative has been created of the atmosphere was awful at the Emirates. I don't feel that. I watched Liverpool versus PSG, the second leg of that game, when PSG won on penalties, and the atmosphere was horrendous at Anfield, horrendous that night. There was nothing going on. PSG were playing really well, and it was just the same. And this was no different. And then I didn't hear pages of pages of newspaper columns written about the Anfield atmosphere after they lost to PSG and it being their fault that Liverpool couldn't turn it around, and they eventually went out on penalties because the Anfield atmosphere didn't show out. It just feels like this is always Arsenal, and I don't know if that's me, kind of with my Arsenal hat on, but it just feels like that. It just feels like a really easy thing to do. There's so much things you could have written about or focused on in your newspaper columns or in whatever you're doing, and yet you're focusing on Arsenal fans. And I just felt like it was really, really over the top. It was a really emotional night. There's no doubt about it. North London forever. You might not like it. I do. But that was just the noise in there when everyone was singing it. It was just impossible not to get caught up on it. But I don't know really well. I don't really know what else the club could have done in the build up to this game. It was a monumental game.
Yeah.
It was the biggest game the Emirates has ever seen. And so, what else can you do but try and build up the atmosphere? I don't think it was really like they were trying to create an atmosphere. I think the fans would have done it anyway. But that whatever it's called was awful. It looked terrible. It's like limp. It's hanging down. It's like, if you're going to do that, then just don't bother. It would have been fine not to have done that. Just do what you did before the Real Madrid game or whatever, because that just clearly didn't work. I'm sure it was done with the best intentions of hoping it was going to look good, but it didn't. But frankly, I don't really care about it too much. I think a lot of fans are caring about it online because they seem to be kind of embarrassed and don't want other fans from other clubs to take the piss out of them on the internet, which doesn't bother me at all.
It's the weirdest thing about social media.
Faceless Twitter account of a Spurs fan or a Man United fan or a Chelsea fan thinks. I couldn't care less, but I know a lot of people do, and it feels like a lot of the time the frustration that comes out of these sort of things is because of people are getting the piss taken out of them on the internet, and that doesn't matter. But I think you're right. I think the club need to learn from this more and engage more with the fans and the suggestions that are being put forward, because there were plenty of suggestions being put forward by the fans to make this a really special pre-match, feels at the Emirates, and it just didn't quite pan out, the way that they wanted, and it didn't look great.
Yeah, I'd just like to share one final word just to celebrate the atmosphere as well, because I think we want to do that as much as possible. I don't know if anyone can do it on TV, but I can promise you, if you were sat in the press box next to me, what you would have seen right the way up to, sadly, Ousmane Dembele's goal is one of the strangest sights I've seen in football, which is an entire away end bouncing and giving it both barrels. PSG travelling contingent were brilliant, and they were bouncing, and you could sort of see I could see a drummer, and I could see the movement, and I couldn't hear a thing from the PSG fans. The away end, one of the most famously vociferous ultra groups, I think, in French football, couldn't hear them. So strange. But yeah, I mean, and those folks in the Emirates, they'll have a few more Champions League semi-finals in the years to come. I believe that they really did give it everything.
You know what we need to do is stop conceding goals within 10 minutes of a Champions League semi-final.
Really try and do that.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if we could just not concede within the first 10 minutes at home of a Champions League semi-final.
Oh, I've now had flashbacks to that. Thank you.
Yeah, there was no slips this time. No one fell over this time. It was just a shinned finish that found its way in. But anyway, actually, I was going to say Bournemouth, but quickly on Martin Odegaard. Like, I did a show this morning talking about Martin Odegaard. I mean, he's been getting absolute pelters since this game, and I think quite rightly he's been criticised for his performances. But I think people are going way too far. Like, I've had so many people saying, "Get him out. He needs to be sold." Blah blah blah. Strip the captaincy off him. I've already had my say on that. I don't think it's right at all. But in terms of his actual form, because it's not been great this season, I do think there's reasons for that. Context needs to be put on why maybe he's not hitting the sort of form that he showed in each of the last two seasons. But are you like, when you're watching Odegaard at the moment, certainly in these big games like we saw on Tuesday night, are you concerned about the way he's playing, or are you looking at it thinking, this is just a blip? We will get the Martin Odegaard back that we're more used to.
I mean, obviously a blip. I think he'd actually been quite good in the two games before, and he'd had assists in both those games. And I know Crystal Palace and Ipswich aren't PSG, but I felt like he'd been rounding into form with Bukayo Saka back, and we forget that when he came back into that team, which, like, from watching his performances, I'm skeptical that he didn't come back too soon. He didn't have that great tandem to work with that's made Arsenal fantastic. And I think when Martin Odegaard was out of the team, we probably were saying very similar things about Bukayo Saka and everyone else. It's 2.5 years, 3 years of excellence from Martin Odegaard, and a bad run of form, and the morons in the fan base. And it's not the majority, but it's a very, very vocal minority who kind of have been. I feel like a few of them have been waiting in the wings, because a few very stupid, very loud Twitter accounts have been sort of going on about this. There's always people, I think, in the social media world who are just like, well, if I keep saying for years and years and years that this player's rubbish, or this coach is rubbish, or this team's rubbish, at some stage I'll have the bad run of form to vindicate me. It's so obviously a bad run of form, because what do you see in those circumstances? You see a player that is at his best when he's instinctive, just need an extra touch, need an extra moment, and doubting himself. And that's what I saw with Martin Odegaard, and have seen kind of in the bad games this season. And I don't really believe that there's anything about that a good run of goals and form wouldn't change at all. It's stupid. I've not seen anyone say that Martin Odegaard should be sold, mostly because I generally stay off Twitter outside of during games. But if you think that you don't know ball, to sound like the kids who are normally the ones that are screaming and shouting about Martin Odegaard, you don't have a clue about football if you think Martin Odegaard should be sold.
I think it's mad, even to sort of to suggest it. I get that everyone's got their own opinions and all that, but I think if you want Arsenal to continue on this sort of upwards trajectory that they've been on, just the mere suggestion of that Odegaard needs to move on, I just don't get it. But bring players in around him to help him, to share the burden, to allow him to have a rest from time to time. But to sell him, it just makes absolutely no sense to me. And I'm convinced that Odegaard next season, after a decent summer, will come back, especially when he's going to have stronger attackers around him, or better attackers around him. Which, fingers crossed, that he will have. If the club do what they need to do, then I just think he's going to look. He'll be back to his best. This is Arsenal. He's one player of the season last 2 seasons. He's been absolutely brilliant for a long time now. He's having a bad run of form, and I kind of feel like this is the time when you absolutely need to support Martin Odegaard rather than just absolutely hammering and piling on him. It's not going to do him or Arsenal any good in my mind. And I'm not saying no one deserves criticism. Of course they do. You're a top level footballer. You're always going to get criticised, and it's just the way it goes, and he'll have to accept that. But some of it for me is just mad. It really, really is. So looking ahead to sort of Bournemouth this weekend, talking about Odegaard and his struggles, looking at with the PSG game coming up on Wednesday, what would you do if you're Arteta? Because it's an important game. Arsenal kind of need, well, they need to win this game against Bournemouth, no doubt about that. What would you be doing, sort of team selection wise, ahead of Bournemouth?
I would just run out the team pretty much the team I intend to play in the Parc des Princes. It's Saturday night, isn't it?
5:30
through to 5:30 through to Wednesday seems more than enough time for them all to get rested. This isn't we're now kind of coming out of the most intense period of the season, and I think they just need to play themselves back into form. So many of these players, not that they were bad, but they just need to get that rhythm, get that game out of their system, be coming into the Parc des Princes ideally off a strong, authoritative win against a team that have given Arsenal all sorts of issues in recent years, and that are still a good team despite their own slide. I think this is, in many ways, this is the ideal game, because I think you can take a lot mentally from beating a good team like Bournemouth, and yet they shouldn't sort of unduly tax Arsenal. It's still a team that they're capable of winning against. So yeah, I mean, full steam ahead, assuming full fitness. I don't really think there's anyone I'd hold in reserve.
I think you'll probably change your fullbacks. I wouldn't be surprised if Timber might get a rest, because it's just it's the two sort of areas on either side where you can make the change and not be drastically weaker. Yeah. You're looking at Arsenal's bench in that semi-final against PSG. It was just like, oh my God, Champions League semi-final, and you're looking down at the substitutes, and oh my God, that is seriously weak. But the two areas, if you play Ben White, protect during Timber on the weekend, or you play Zinchenko or Tierney at left back, against Bournemouth, you think that's fine, and you can give Miles and during a bit of a rest. Obviously, Thomas Partey comes back in. Ideally, I think you'd like to rest. I reckon one of Bukayo or Martin might get a rest. I think Ethan might play in this one. I certainly wouldn't. I do not want to be turning up and seeing Raheem Sterling starting like we saw against whoever it was. I can't remember that game. The game when Sterling started the other day. It was the Palace, wasn't it? It was against Palace. Yeah, and I don't want to be seeing that again.
If I was Raheem Sterling, I wouldn't want to start again because you don't want to be playing against too many. You don't want any more evidence out there of how far off the pace of the Premier League teams you are.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe Ethan might come in for one of the two. But yeah, not wholesale changes at all. But it's an important game, isn't it? It's definitely an important game for Arsenal, no doubt about it.
I mean, second matters. I think. I mean, it matters in terms of prize money. I think it matters for just staking out that for all the trying circumstances this season has delivered, the Arsenal are a team that can still really be, the nearest challengers in the title race, and they're not close enough. But I think considering you've got Liverpool and Newcastle coming straight after, get them 3 points in the bag, and you can sort of breathe easily. And I mean, I'm not at all worried about the slipping out of the top 5, but I think second matters a little bit.
I think it matters definitely. You want it if it's there, you want to get it. I don't think I'm not going to lose any sleep if Arsenal finish second or third or fourth because it's been a pretty average season in the Premier League, and nothing's going to change that. If Arsenal finish second, it's still going to be an average season in the Premier League this season. It's not been good. It's not been much fun. But if they finish fourth, I'm not going to really change my opinion on that. But if it's there, you want to do it. You want to finish second, don't you? Just quickly move on to a couple of questions now before we wrap this one up for today. This is Killer King David who's talking about Odegaard. He says, "Hi Charles, concerning Odegaard, it's funny how some fans can be so reactive. It just shows the level of understanding of the game of some so-called fans. Odegaard has been our best player for the last 2 seasons, but no, let's throw him out with the bathwater after one tough year. This type of toxic behaviour that scapegoats players at the moment at the merest sign of difficulty led to the Xhaka fracas. Yep. And we all saw how that went. We don't learn. For now, Odegaard needs an arm around the shoulder, and then come summer, sign quality cover in competition because he just cannot shoulder the creative burden of this team alone. Sign Eze to provide that and be an option off the left. Cheers." I thought that was a good comment. It's kind of exactly how I feel about it. I feel like I saw it. Who was it who said this? I can't remember who it was. It was someone who was kind of standing up a bit for Odegaard, said that Arsenal, I think they said that it's thrown him under the bus, which I think was maybe a little bit too far because, Odegaard needs to perform. But they haven't done a lot, have they? They've left him with so much burden in the central area to create. And I think they need to fix that this summer and make sure there is other options there that can share the burden. He can come out and have a rest. But I thought that was a good comment from David on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe they misprofiled Nwaneri. It looks like he's really kind of more of a shooter and an option in the front three than to be the right.
It was interesting against PSG when he did take over off Nwaneri. It was Nwaneri went out to the right and Saka sort of drifted into the centre more with the two of them. I thought that was quite interesting, even for just a few minutes.
I'm always down to see that. I think that I would love to, if I was kind of in Arteta's position, I'd love to sort of have a pre-season or a couple of low-stakes competitive games where I could see what Saka could do in the middle. I did think that was really notable. You've got to give Odegaard help, and you've got to give him a summer off as well.
This one from Femi, who says, "Hey Charles and James, how much do you think the team has missed Gabby's leadership at the back? I think his leadership is underrated and he's been so missed, a bit more than his other qualities because Kivior stepped up well. Big Gabby is 27 now and leads the back line very well. Saliba just turned 24, not quite the vocal leader at the back yet. What are your thoughts?" I don't really think that they've missed his leadership because I think, as Femi points out, Kivior's done very, very well. At the time when he was injured, I was like, this is a big leader who's gone ahead of some really, really big games. But, the way they dealt with Real Madrid, I think was really good. And I look at the PSG game, I'm not sure his leadership would have made much difference to that opening 25 minutes. It's all hypothetical, I suppose. But it wasn't like the first thing that came into my mind. But what do you think?
It's a really interesting question. And I mean, you would almost love to see the counterfactual where Gabby starts. And do they adjust a bit quicker? But I mean, you equally, like, you take the good and the bad. I think we've seen even more of Rice as a leader in Gabby's absence, haven't we? An organizer of the back line. I think to an extent it's good for someone like Saliba to be the senior centre back as well, to be the one that has the pressure put on him. I think kind of given all that and Kivior's performances, I think you kind of have to take the positives from this. And I don't know that if you swap Gabriel into the team, it would do much that stops Kvaratskhelia and Dembele if they're in that mood. Sometimes good attack beats good defense.
Mm-hmm. To be fair to Kivior as well, I've really noticed in the last few games how much sort of responsibility he takes on the pitch. You know, he's a big talker, Kivior, I think, surprisingly so. Especially with the sort of language barrier that we always get told about when it comes to Kivior. But I think he's a big talker. He marshals that defence well. I think he's shown quite a lot of leadership.
I was chatting to some folks from Polish TV. Even they were surprised how loud and vocal and excellent he is. I think they were all saying we didn't see this Jakub Kivior turning up against Real Madrid. And I was like, well, at least I don't blame myself for not seeing it then.
Yeah, no, but I think it's been really, really noticeable. Go on from Felix here. He says, hi, Charles and James. Hope you're both well. How much do you think the quarterfinal in Munich last year would have taught the players about this competition? And do you see that experience being very helpful next week in Paris? We can still do this. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, Arteta's spoken about this, hasn't he? That you can really feel that this is a team that kind of learned the hard lesson of maybe switching off a bit against Bayern. And I don't think they've really switched off since. I don't think. I mean, the tough part is they went to Munich in very different circumstances. It was kind of casting my mind back. I think we all expected Arsenal to, like, we weren't like they're going to win, but we said they are good enough that like they should be able to do this. They had been the better team in the first leg. By a pretty decent margin. This is so different, but I think the one thing you would say is it maybe takes away any fear factor that might have emerged at the Emirates and it eases up on the pressure a little bit. You can go there in a let's show our best selves, let's take a swing at this and see what happens mindset. We've never seen that from this Arsenal team in the Champions League, I don't think so.
No. There are a lot of regrets after Munich, and you would think that this same team will not want to have that feeling again after Paris. Even if they go out, they don't want to go out like with real regrets over the performance and not quite doing enough on the night.
Yeah.
You know, Munich, I think they were very underwhelming, and that hopefully that hurt will sort of spur them on a little bit in this game, just to, if they are going to go out, to really sort of go out fighting and give it a real go. And I reckon Mikel will send that message to them. So I think, yeah, maybe that experience and the sort of feeling in the dressing room afterwards in Munich might help them in this one to really sort of give it a proper go and make sure if you do go out, you go out swinging without in terms of that. And then finally, I got on here from C Lord says something that was understandably missed after our draw with Palace last week is that they can now only finish as high as 7th, meaning no top 5 in Champions League for them. Does that mean the next episode of Extra Time will be in person? So James can hand over the £50, maybe in the form of a large check, like they're doing news stories about donations being given to charity. I tell you what, I said to James in that meal when we're sitting down before going to watch the PSG game, that if Crystal Palace win the FA Cup,
he did,
I will let him off the £50 bet because I want Crystal Palace to win the FA Cup so much. So if Palace go on and win the FA Cup, I will let him off that £50 bet and he won't have to give it to me. If they lose, then he does have to give it to me. But
I'll tell you what, and I'll thingy that if Palace win the FA Cup, let's say that 50 quid can go to a charity of your choosing, Charles.
I was going to say it as well. Instead of actually give it to me, that £50, whatever happens, can go to the Arsenal Foundation. Should we put it that way?
Oh, sounds a little bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah. So if Palace win the FA Cup, then the £50 can go to Arsenal Foundation, but if they lose, it goes as well. So everyone, the Arsenal Foundation.
Either way, I'm paying the price for my hubris. Either way,
the Arsenal Foundation are the winner here, which is a good thing. Thing, and I think that's a good time to finish. Oh, look at that! I've just cut James off. Sorry, mate. Ahead of time. So look, thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, I'll be back tomorrow. We've got a press conference as well tomorrow with Mikel Arteta. James, have an amazing honeymoon, mate. I hope it is 3 absolutely glorious weeks that yourself and your wife will remember for forever. So I hope it goes really well, mate. And we'll catch up on your return.
Yeah, thanks, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.